So glad of you to be here. Thanks for coming. I mean, there's a keynote and everybody loves keynotes, right? So awesome that you will be here. First, I have to apologize, I guess, because who was here yesterday? Or like for this talk yesterday? Sorry about that. We had a problem with plane flights canceled, that kind of thing. And while I was ending up, I heard that, say 7 in the morning, and I was calling the venue. We have a problem. I cannot make it for the talk. And they say, if you can come in, say, before 7 p.m., then you will be scheduled in one of the Birds of a Feather sessions. So I rushed into the airport. I had another flight rebooked, so I would be in at 7 p.m. I raced with a taxi driver to the venue, and I was here like, say, 6:45 or something. And then room 5 was double booked. Unfortunately, I couldn't do my session yesterday, but on the other hand, it wasn't like rescheduled in the app and in on the website. So here I am now, and thank you for being here, because security is more or less not a nice topic, not a favorite topic of most of the developers, right? Because we are builders. But let's talk about data, because that's what we're going to talk about today. And they say that data is in some sort of way the new gold. Well, why should it be? I mean, everybody wants to gather data. Everybody wants to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your behavior is, just to improve their products or their services. They want to specifically market it to the people who need it, or actually perhaps invent something that you perhaps do not know that you need it, but because of your behavior, we can tailor that to you. On this day, we do not simply buy products anymore. We buy experiences, as they say. So we measure how people behave and what they want. By doing that, so we can improve it. We actually try to predict the future. What do you need in the future? And to do so, we want your data compared with your behavior and perhaps also your personal data. We do this every day, and we do it for a good cause. Let's say if you work for a company that has a website and sells things, you probably work with these kind of things, Google Analytics. You try to see where people are coming from, where people go into your flow, say in your web sales, or where they bend off. And if you see where it goes wrong, then you probably can fix that and try to improve that so the stats will be better, right? The same thing is where we do testing, like, say this button is green or this button is yellow. Probably the yellow one scores better than the red one. And these kind of things we want to save. Google now saves these things kinda anonymously, or they say they do. But if we take this the other way around, and we do have the same thing, and we do know what you do and what you want, by providing you with some sort of information, we can actually steer you in some way. If I just give you information in just one direction, you will probably think and go in that way if that already suits your pattern. And if you don't believe me, we had some things like Facebook and Cambridge Analytics. Who didn't heard of that? Everybody knows what the problem was here, right? So data can be used for good. I mean, improving products, giving me new things that I really want or I really like is, in my opinion, is a good thing. But it can also be used in a bad way. And that's what we're going to talk about, because we all work with data, right? But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Brian, and I'm an engineer. And that's the most important part. I'm not a software expert kind of thing that learned from books. No, I work on real systems. I program systems, and I made a mistake or 2, or 3, or 4 perhaps. And I try to learn from that. And I will make many mistakes, and I will share some things in this room today that I've encountered in real products, in real environments, in real systems. So I work for this company called Blue for IT. It's nothing special. It's just a consultancy company, and we work mainly for bigger companies inside the Netherlands. So say for banking systems, for insurance systems, for government systems, But most of the times, these are systems that have personal data in it. And if we talk about data and about privacy, many people tend to use this phrase. But I got nothing to hide. Here, you've got my social security number. Here, I don't care if my pictures are on Facebook. I don't care if you know where I live, what I do, what I buy, what I eat. Well, perhaps that's kind of true. But this is a news article from just a few months ago, in March. The women's national handball team from the Netherlands was secretly being filmed while being in a sauna. That film was exposed on several websites. And if you ask the people now, do you still got nothing to hide? They probably think differently. So, if you take this to the extremes, you probably have something to hide. And I think everybody has something to hide. Or at least we have the right of our privacy, right? Because can you imagine that, say, Google. We always use Google to search things, right? If Google will forward all your search queries to, say, everybody, to say, for instance, your health security, would that be nice? I mean, if we see this photo over here, you see that here in Poland, in 2016, 40% of the people tried to search on Google what they have if they have like an itch or something. And by searching on the internet and clicking through, you end up from just having a rash to like some sort of disease that will never be cured again. But if Google saves this kind of information and sells it to your insurance company, what would that do to your fees you have to pay? I wouldn't like that. It's a bit private, right? Let's take it to another extreme. Or is it extreme? Have you heard what happens in China nowadays? In China nowadays, in the largest city, they have this social ranking system. With all the video cameras in the city, in the major cities, they try to do face recognition on those people, and they credit them with a social score. And what does that mean? If you have a good social score, then you get discounts on, say, hotel rooms or fun stuff or your mortgage even. But another example is if you jaywalk, so walk through a red light, and you do that for 3 times, it's practically impossible to get a mortgage for your house. So you will credit negatively. If you have a lot of friends that have positive scores, you will have a positive score as well. And that's how they try to manipulate you to behave good. This is quite legitimate, actually, because it's the government, right? But is it good? I don't think so. And I think this is like the point where it starts to get a little bit itchy, right? So these things are all gathered from reliable and legal sources. But you can imagine that data is very important to everybody. Say, companies that do legitimate things, but also companies or other stuff that don't do legitimate things or actually want to have that data but cannot legally have that. There is a big aftermarket for data. And then we come into the problem of cybercrime. Cybercrime is like a big, fluffy kind of thing. But the problem is people still think that stealing data or getting into your system is more or less done by lone wolves. And that is not true. There is so much money going on here that we have to face and we have to see it as organized crime. So it is a real threat. And people tend to specialize in these things. Like the one guy is just penetrating your system, the other guy is selling your data, and it gets distributed all over the place. And it can have like enormous consequences, right? So they are professional. And the problem is, for them, the risks are very low. Because what do you think? Is it easier to get caught by trafficking drugs or by stealing data? In my opinion, I think trafficking drugs is easier to get caught with because you have to traffic something, right? From one place to another, and we have all laws in place, and police and border security. With data, it's more or less impossible to get these guys because where are they from? Where do they operate from? And again, there's a lot of money involved. And what do I mean by a lot of money? Cybercrime damage worldwide in 2016 was over $3 trillion. I compared it to the biggest bank heist ever, which was the Bank of Iraqi. It was in 2003, which was just $1 billion. And the annual budget for the US military expenses is $600 million. So I cannot even imagine what $300 trillion is. And if you read the predictions, they say it will be triple or quadruple or even 6 times more in, say, 2021 or something. At least, it doesn't matter how much more it is, it's a lot. If we take this back to our system, then we see that we have an obligation as developers. As developers, we need to secure the data because people give us the data and people trust us, or people trust at least the company you work for. And every kind of incident we can describe in this triangle, the so-called CIA triad. We have confidentiality, availability, and integrity. And if you have to focus, you have to look at your own system and see what of these 3 things is the most important. Just to explain, availability is quite obvious. Is your system available? Sometimes it seems very important, but sometimes it is actually not. Availability is important for, say, information about, well, say, a tsunami warning system. That would be a big disaster if it's offline, so it should be online. Then availability is your main core. On the other hand, we have integrity. Integrity simply means consistency, accuracy. Is it trustworthy? I've worked for a lot of banks and insurance companies. And although you might think that availability is one of the big issues, integrity is more important. I mean, people can handle it if my banking system on my mobile is out for a few hours or is out for a day. It surely harms them, but if the integrity is not good and my money is all gone, I will be really pissed. I don't know how about you, but I will be really pissed. Confidentiality, roughly, is the same thing as privacy. You don't want things to get into the wrong hands, right? Sometimes it's quite sensitive what kind of data you have. And you don't want it to have it exposed to the outside world. And we just saw one of these things in the examples from beforehand. All right, that's all cool. But now we have this law, right? Now we have GDPR. GDPR is in place since, 25th of May or something? And it will solve everything. Yeah, perfect. On paper, perhaps. Yes, I declare that I will be very, very polite and very good to your data. Well, even though that your system is impenetrable, is super good, super strong, we still have one issue to go. And I will show this in this little slide.
So I invited a few of the world's best hackers to try to hack me and show me where my vulnerabilities are. And now I'm going to meet them in Las Vegas for DEF CON, the biggest hacker convention of the year. They're going to hack me using social engineering, which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and an internet connection.
Do you want to do a sample phishing call?
What's phishing?
Phishing is voice solicitation, and basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Who are you going to call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider and
Okay.
see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm going to spoof from your number, so it's going to look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. My husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry. I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
At gmail.com?
Jessica gets access to my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, How would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account.
Jess uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry. So there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my password.
Thank you so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right. Thank you.
Holy shit. So they just gave you access to my entire cell phone account.
You're going to have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a piece done by Kevin Rose in February 2016 from Fusion. You see the link below, so if you want to read about it more, because there are a couple of more things he did. But you see, if your system is impenetrable, there is still the problem between the keyboard and the chair, right? The person in it. And who knows, we are sitting in that chair between the keyboard and the chair, between chair and keyboard. It's us as well. And then we could say, yeah, but we're not that stupid, right? I mean, if you see things like this, you all know this, right? You see these like, I'm the daughter of this late prince in Nigeria, and we have a couple of millions to spare, and we want to funnel it to your account, and you will get paid by it. We will not fall for this anymore. I hope. Who will? Luckily, no hands. Awesome. But this one looks pretty much more legit. I mean, for us as developers, we're tech savvy. We know that people do this and it's phishing and we do not care. But it has a logo on top of it. It has a trademark sign on it. But it still says, Dear Bank of America customer. My bank wouldn't do that. And we know that. Probably my mother or my grandmother would fall for it. But then we had the following experiment. And this one is in Dutch, so I will read it for you. It's from Rabobank, which is one of the major banks in the Netherlands. And it says, Dear Simon, due to maintenance, your login credentials were reset. To make sure you can use the Wi-Fi, we urge you to reset your login within 48 hours to update it. To do so, make sure to use this link. With kind regards, IT and Infra Support. And IT and Infra Support is a real legitimate part of Rabobank. And iConnect is the local Wi-Fi over there, which is the first layer of defense to get to the servers where deployments are on, where Jenkins is on, where Git is on. So this is the first layer. So you need to be on that network or either on a VPN to go to that part of the system. This one is personalized. Is sent to this guy's email address at Rabobank, which is not quite heavy to get to. I mean, if you look on LinkedIn, I can see where you work, and it's probably first name dot last name at company name dot whatever. And if you add this email, or you just send this email at the right moment, at the right time, say when you have production problems and you know that the iConnect Wi-Fi is a bit dodgy sometimes from time to time, people will fall for it. And you probably would say, I won't, because... But I think all of you can point out some colleague that, yeah, whatever, it's true, whatever, done. And actually, they found out that developers sometimes did. So, although it seems phishing from the point of view now, if you do that under the right circumstances with the right amount of legitimate data, people will fall for it. So we are vulnerable too. And let's focus on us a bit more first. So I want to do a show of hands. Who of you has a laptop? The rest just works on the phone. Awesome. But, okay, you have a laptop. And who of you take this laptop from work back to home, back to work every day because we want to do some work at home or something? Who ships his laptop back to home? I do. I'm a consultant. I do. Where do you keep your laptop? I mean, if you travel by car, for instance, and you need to make a stop for gas, where do you keep your laptop? Is it in the trunk of your car? I mean, it's quite easy to follow you, to see what your rituals are, break into your car, get your laptop. And then we have to consider what's on that laptop. Is there vulnerable data? Is there software from the client on it? What information is on that laptop? I mean, 2 years ago we had a party because of New Year's Eve, or it was after New Year, and we had to celebrate again with all the new employees. And we went to this venue, and people left their laptop in the car, and it looks like a really secure venue. When we ended up 2 hours later, 2 cars were broken in and laptops were stolen. And perhaps there wasn't any identifiable data to a client on it or to a customer on it. It is a really bad thing for the company. I mean, most of these leaks is just people leaving a USB drive in the train and forgot it, and there is sensitive data on it. Who of you encrypts their hard drive? Has encryption? Awesome. Good thing. The other part, who has access to your laptop? Only you? Even when you go to the toilet, do you lock it? And everybody says, yes, of course. But we made this joke like a couple of years ago when somebody didn't do, and we just sent an email to the whole department. There's a barbecue next Saturday. It's at your home, and the drinks are for free. He never left his laptop open again. It works. So lock it, of course, because these are the easy parts. So then we go to a little bit more fuzziness. Say passwords. Passwords are one of my favorite things. We all have multiple, whatever, a lot of passwords, right? Who uses a password more than one time? Yeah, sure, nobody. Yeah. All right. So who uses a password manager? I do. Who randomly generates their passwords? Cool. So nobody really uses the password? Really? I mean, if you do, of course, if they crack one of the passwords, they just run a script over everything and try if it works over there as well. So be careful with your passwords, because the first time I went to my how is it called in English? My previous employer. When I went there, I went to the office, and I worked from the office over there, and I said, "Can you help me? I need the Wi-Fi code." He said, "Yeah, just walk over to my desk, and there's a paper next to it, and there's the Wi-Fi code on it." So I walked over to his desk, saw a booklet next to his laptop, which contains every single password he owned, including the Wi-Fi password. But I cannot remember it. He wasn't that tech savvy, but you understand that that's not a good practice, right? Hey, so about passwords, we're on one line. Who does DevOps? Nobody? One. Who of you has access to, say, production systems, to the production database to fix things? So you kind of do DevOps. You develop, and when the shit hits the fan, you have to fix it. DevOps is nothing more than you break it, you fix it, or you build it, you run it. If you build the shit, run the shit. It's not my quote. But when we have DevOps or we do production stuff, we have elevated privileges, right? We can get into the Git account. We can get into the database, which probably contains client data, perhaps even pictures or social security numbers. So that means that we are, as developers, are a liability ourselves. And if we do not take care of our own interests and our own safety, how can we handle the safety of our clients? Think about that. I mean, it's far more easier, you see, it's just a phone call, to trick you than to penetrate your firewall. So what would I do if I want to get into the data? I try to trick you. Another thing, we all do testing, right? Who does testing for the software? The rest of you is just YOLO, put it in production, and whatever happens, we'll see. We do DevOps. But let's talk about test data. I mean, how many of you uses test data, uses a copy of the production database on your development or even on your local machine to test for, say, then it's like production. Who does that? Who has a copy of the production database on his laptop? 1, 2, 3. Who just didn't want to dare to put their hands up but actually had? So the rest of you has like a database on it with, say, normalized data or fake data or even unidentified data. That is a good thing. If you have a copy of production on it and it contains client data, you probably have now, since the May 25th, you have a real big problem if they find out because of GDPR. So these kind of things are pretty obvious, right? As I said, I worked for government agencies, I worked for banking institutions, and they all have these kind of things with these e-learning systems. What is security? What shouldn't you do? Make sure that nobody looks over your shoulder when you put in your password. Make sure your password is strong. Don't let anybody in who is not allowed. Blah, de blah, de blah, de blah. We're all like, yeah, click, 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 whatever. And then a new guy comes in. And the new guy comes in, the new guy scenario, or the new girl scenario. I'm sorry, this is not a thing. The new guy comes in, and this actually happens multiple times for players I worked for. The first time we really needed a new developer, and the developer came in, but the first thing was he cannot get into the office because it's a bank. You need to get scanned, and well, okay, we can get through that. We just add him as a visitor. Perfect, he's in. Then he comes in. Because he is not allowed into the building, there is no account for him. So he cannot get into the code. He cannot get into the documentation. Well, perfect. You have my account to the wiki, and you can read on it. No harm, no foul. And we can keep doing that for, say, a few days. But after 3 days, it's still not done. I mean, banks are slow. Government agencies are even slower. So what happens? A normal person with a security kind of mind would say, yeah, perhaps we should do some pair programming. Just look with me, and then But most of the time, what you see, that these people need to work because they're hired to do what work. So they get the Git credentials from colleague A. They get the Wi-Fi credentials from colleague B. They can enter the building on the pass of colleague C. Or they get a copy of the code. That is all against all the e-learning stuff we just learned. And it happens. And managers do agree with that. Because at that point, they're just facing the fact we need new features. We need this guy to help us. And that's the thing that happens a lot with software development, right? We are looking at features. We need to build this. We need to have this thing before our competitors. And when do you need it? I need it yesterday or today. Or, okay, tomorrow is fine as well. But we need it ASAP. And then you push on it. And they say, okay, well, you need to design your security. You need to do security by design. Yeah, that's an empty phrase if you do not know what it is. I mean, it's quite simple. If you do data storage, you have to ask yourself a few questions. What do we store? Pretty simple, right? But do we also need it? I mean, I've seen systems that stores gender and, say, religions, what kind of religion you are, but we didn't use it. So why did you store it? That's a good question, right? I mean, according to GDPR now, you have to describe why you store these kind of data. How long do you need it? I mean, do you need it for ages? Do you throw it away after a few years? Is this data traceable? Can we trace it back to an individual person? I think that's an important thing as well. I mean, if it's just men and women, it's not that important. But if I can trace it back to you, then perhaps that part is not important as well. But if I just add enough data to it, I will get a complete profile out of you and even more. And I can predict things about you. Or I can do nasty things with it, like identity theft kind of stuff. And who has access to that data? If you look into to all the GDPR stuff, you see that it's based on the least privilege principle, which simply means that if you have a user account, it should only access the data you really need. last year there was a problem in a Dutch hospital. There was a celebrity in, and all the hospital personnel was checking what her file was and what she actually had. They got a reprimand. They got fined by it because 80% of the personnel in that case wasn't working on that patient. So that's an example of they didn't put in the least privilege principle. Okay, but we talked about software development, about feature-based, right? So I'm going to show you how software development works over time. And it's like a comic. I mean, you work on a software system, and the first time you build a software system, it is quite small. The scope is quite small. It's quite elegant, and you can oversee everything you want. It's like this. It's a nice little building, and it has a door, it has a window, and I can sleep in it. Perfectly to survive. So, nicely scoped. It's built from the ground up. We can see all these plans, if it's secure or not. And well, it's in production, it works quite well, and then your product manager comes. We have this little thing we want to add to it. You recognize it? And the first time it's not that kind of a problem, because we have a little feature, and it's quite logical that we put it into that surface or to that piece of software. It's still maintainable, and it's still quite scoped. And then it runs for, say, a couple of months. And then the competitor comes up with something else, and then your product manager comes again to you. We want this, and we need to build it on top of what we have. And then you say, yeah, but it was not designed to do this. I don't care, I want it, and we need it, because it has business value. And you end up with something like this. It works. It's not quite what it should be, but it works. Hey, if it's stupid but it works, but if it's stupid but it works, it ain't stupid, right? Okay, well, it's not that concise anymore. It's not that scoped, but we can manage. And then the shit hits the fan. Because when you give them one finger, they want the whole hand, and then your arm, and then everything, and you'll end up with something like this. Let's change it, and we do this on top of that, and well, if your foundation of your system, you just expand it, right? It's software. We can do everything. The sky is the limit. So expanding your scope. Well, okay, we work on that, and the pressure is that high. We do not have the time to face into technical debt, and technical debt in some way equals kind of security liabilities. And over time, they want more and more and more, and want one system to rule them all. We want to fly helicopters on it. We want to call space into it, and we want to do everything it because we are awesome. If I just show you this as building of a house, it's quite obvious that this is not a great way to work. But if you're building software, it's actually what happens. People tend to build things on top of that, and actually it wasn't designed to be that large, that big, or that concise. But you end up with these kind of strange systems, and then the new guy comes in. And why are you doing this? Yeah, that's a long story. And with these kind of things, building on top and on top and on top, security issues come up. And I will show you a little example of a real-world thing that happened to the team I worked for in the past. We had a small app with a Java backend, and the app was just to search the house market in the Netherlands. It did something more, but for the example, it just you could search. You could put in search parameters, and then you will find your house in the city you want it, in perhaps the area you want it. And it had a profile service, because we have user profiles, and we want to store that profile on the server, but we wanted to do that anonymously. So what we did is simply create a UUID, and we could store the list of preferences on it. So as we stored the UUID as well on the device, and we could go up and down to get the preferences. And why did we store that on the server? Because we could do some server-side things and provide you with that user profile with some precompiled data that these houses are probably what you're looking for, instead of doing that real time. Well, it was quite legit. We did it to make sure that everybody could use the system, that we do not have any personal data in it. Kind of okay. And that worked for a while. And then the manager came and he wanted to add a new feature. And the new feature was, I want to claim my own house from the Dutch National Database of houses. And then I could point it into the market with a price. So actually trying to sort of pre-sell it and look how it does into the market. That was the obvious thing. And the step afterwards was like, maybe we can even sell houses. So we made a new service, and it was the My Home service. And it contained a contained a few things. You could claim a house that this is my house, and we could store it for you. You could update the things in your house, like say you wanted to add pictures to it, and we had a thing that finds all houses in our system to display it. But we needed to add it to a user account in that case. But one of the things was that house could only be claimed once. So we said, okay, now we want to add something unique to that user profile, that if he loses his device or wants to go to another device, we do not have the UUID anymore. So we make a secure login, and we store the email addresses only for the people that claim their house to sell it. That seems quite legit as well. There was only a problem, and we found it out months later. If we look back into that My Home service, there was a find all houses thing. And the houses were like the UUID of the user, the house address, the pictures, and all that kind of stuff. And on the profile service, there was a thing that I could anonymously get the profile of somebody with only a UUID. Oops. Because now I could actually call the all houses endpoint, which was not secure, end up with all the houses in our system that had an actual address, find the user ID, call the get profile by ID, and simply get in all the data from the user profile. Luckily, we only saved the email address. But normally, what do people do with an email address? First name, dot last name, at company, dot whatever. So we had a data leak, they said. Okay, what should we do about it? First of all, you should look out and look at what data is actually exposed to the outside world. Because although we like to create stuff and it works, we still have to look at these tiny things. What do we expose? Okay, we looked into that and we know the problem. But that's not the point. We had a data leak, and people were screaming at us and coming to us. And well, the fix was actually quite nice. The fix was done in 5 minutes, including shipping, including deploying. The rest of it took 4 weeks, because then you got these questions. All right, you had a data leak. Who was exposed? How long was it in there? How long was it vulnerable? What was the impact? Is it the only leak? Of course you say yes. That's the only leak. We're perfect by now. And of course the customer question, am I a victim? That was a hard one. Who was exposed? We only could say we have these amount of houses and this amount of email addresses, so that could be the probable exposure, but we didn't know how much people are actually exposed. If the leak was actually like used by bad people, because somebody reported it to us. To solve this, we needed to do more logging. And I would actually say log everything. And it sounds a bit strange. But luckily we had some centralized logging. But we didn't log everything. But if we had logged all the if we had logged all the incoming messages from the get profile, we would probably see if this thing was used extensively. And if it was, then we should come up with a lower amount that we had now. Because we now can only say, these are the users with houses, so this is the probable exposure, but we didn't know how much it was. If we had more logging and we did it like in a good way centralized, then the problem shouldn't be that hard to call. So that's one thing. I would say that if you build a system and it's a distributed system, make sure you have some kind of centralized logging. Say the Elk Stack by Elastic, but there are more of these implementations. If you log every incoming request with, for example, an IP, you can find out if it's if you are exposed or not. Okay, but that is after it happens, right? I want to do it on forehand. I want to do it before my things are in production. But the problem is, we do continuous integration and continuous delivery. And how do we do that with, say, security audits? I don't know who of you works in a big company. Then you have some sort of security agency or security department, right? Have you ever asked them to do a security audit? It takes freaking forever. Like, yeah, we will be done in 4 weeks. But I deploy 3 times a day. Yeah, but you should do penetration test. Yes, but we deploy 3 times a day. Okay. So what can we do? First of all, you should do a security audit once in a while, and penetration test once in a while, but it's not feasible to do only that. First of all, we solved it with automatic security testing. And that's a bit of a big word. We made sure that every build went to Sonar, which filtered out like really buggy code. That is the first layer of defense. Then we had a system called Fortify, which looked statically analysis over the code if there were vulnerabilities in it. But that was not enough. Because do you know what this is? You're Java developers, right? Who is a Java developer? Awesome. Then you probably know that this is a POM file. And this is a POM file from line 977 to 1023. And it's just a tiny snippet of it. But it only contains dependencies. And when you look to that through these dependencies, you could look like, okay, first of all, why do we use so much? Why do we have so much dependencies? Do we all use them? And are they up to date? Because if there's a vulnerability in my dependency, I wouldn't know because I'm just building on because my product manager wants new features, right? So we also included automatic dependency testing. And for that, there are a couple of things like you have the dependency checker from OWASP. You've got things as SNCC from SNCSec. You've got JFrog you got X-Ray from JFrog. And we also used a point with, inside the bank which was called CLM, which is a product from Sonatype. But there are several products, some for free, some not, that can check your dependencies because I don't know what's in there. Even though it's probably some of these dependencies are legitimate, but some of these dependencies are just scooped from GitHub. They're just a GitHub repo. I don't know if they're good, bad, or ugly. Then, of course, we did code reviews. Who does code reviews in their team? That's not every. The rest do pair programming or something, or just like again YOLO. Code review is a good thing. And code review, we tend to do code review on a scale like, is this code nice? Is this code really good styled? I mean, no, I want that bracket not on the next line, I want it on the same line. No, you shouldn't use this string builder thing, but string buffer, or the other way around. Because it's better, faster, stronger, whatever. That's the kind of code reviews we do. But normally, we do not look at security kind of issues. And that was the problem with our vulnerability. And I will show you it in code. We had this. On top, you see the endpoint. It was a get all houses endpoint, which simply returned all houses from the repository. Below that, you see partially the class of the my house thing. And it had a string, some dates, user ID, which was used to connect it to the user profile. Street number, zip code, city. And this was just, because of Spring Boot, of course, it was exposed that way. Who knows what the fix was? Sorry? Yeah, you could use DCOs, but this one was simpler. By simply doing at JSON ignore, we didn't expose that one anymore. Of course, this wasn't enough, because now security was on our roof and was stomping into us. You had a security leak, you bastard. So we decided to make everything behind login credentials. We made sure that all services were connected. Only the endpoints to the outside were exposed through the firewall. We made sure that you could only log in, and all services were protected with JWT tokens. That's a whole different talk. But we made it secure again. And then we decided, okay, of course, this guy wants new features and the guy wants new things, but we need to design to be compromised. It's not when it fails, or not if it fails, but when it fails. You will get a leak someday, but you want to prevent it as much as possible to do that on forehand. I mean, if you ride a motorcycle, you probably will fall once. They say you have two types of motorcyclists. The guys that already have fallen and the guys that gonna fall. Nobody will ride a motorcycle for 80 years and never fall down on the floor. And that's the same thing with building software. You have to design to be compromised. For instance, there are some rules about password protection, say. Things like user password policy, we have to use a cryptographically strong credential-specific salt. Wow, that's a whole mouthful. Which simply means we have to use a salt which contains, say, data from 32 to 64 bytes. We use a cryptographic hash instead of a normal hash, because a cryptographic hash, of course, is slower. And you, say, for the PBKDF2 implementation, you can insert the amount of cycles it has to do before you store it. But what I want to say with these things is you have to review this every time. Because if you build this once and you say, it was good then, it doesn't mean it's good now. You have to review it every single time. Because at this time, SHA-265 of 256 is perhaps strong enough. But tomorrow, perhaps not anymore. And if you leave that behind and only focus on the functionalities, you probably end up being fired. The other thing we did was, again, the centralized logging. And we put alerting on it. We did some research about centralized logging. And because we cannot tackle every security issue, we did some logging on it. Because if you do centralized logging and you do analyzation on it, you can do things like look for high CPU. If in one time you have a top CPU, it can mean two things. Or it can mean a few things. First of all, it can mean you just wrote buggy code. But it can also mean that somebody is pushing your system and actually trying to DOS you or something. We also log things like 500 errors in our system for the same reason. It could be buggy code, but it could also be an intrusion. Things like resets on admin passwords are logged into our in this case, the ELK stack. IP ranges. Things like if this server or service is only meant to be used internally and it has input from external IP addresses, we have a serious problem. It is exposed. And by doing these kind of things and by analyzing this data and refining these rules, like if somebody uses a parameter which contains union, they probably want to do a SQL injection. If you look at the internet, you probably can find sets of these rules to implement. But to do so, and by refining it, and by doing centralized logging, we probably get into these problems in an earlier stage and fix it instantly. And that's how we can maintain the continuous deployment, but also make sure that security is a bit less angry onto us. And that's what the last thing is about. I mean, we have to work together. And this is more or less the painful part, because normally we are developers, and we like to build things. And security department is more or less a pain in the ass, right? Or not? You have all nice security guys that you do great. Normally it's like they point out, you made a flaw. But by getting to these security guys, most of them are very good in, say, network error or network kind of intrusions. But they do not have a clue about how to make applications. So if you combine this and the security guys are a bit less bullying on you and you be more of like, okay, let's work together, you probably can end up with a system that is perhaps not foolproof, but if something goes wrong, you can get there in time. So that's what I want to give you today. Actually, we should, instead of splitting it together into a security company or security thing, and we developers and have a war together, we should actually work together. I'm exactly on time. My name is Brian. Thank you for this talk. I hope you found it interesting. If there are questions, come on over here and ask me. Thank you.